Hi everyone and welcome back to a new episode of Diagnose Dan. Today we're working on a 2008 Opel Corsa, which is quite a popular little city car here in Europe. And this car is equipped with an Easytronic gearbox. Now an Easytronic gearbox is basically a manual transmission that shifts automatically, if that makes sense. Now this car was literally towed into my shop and it came from another workshop with a handwritten note. And the note says, "Good afternoon, Danny. 2 weeks ago, this car was towed into our shop. It had shifting issues and we diagnosed it with a bad Easytronics gearbox control module. We replaced it with a remanufactured one and it was remanufactured by Easytronics. After we replaced it, the car worked fine again for 1 day. After that, the car wouldn't start anymore, we can't communicate with the engine anymore, and we can't communicate with the gearbox anymore. Please diagnose it for us." So that's exactly what we're going to do in this video. So let's diagnose it together. Now before we continue with this Corsa, a little update on my previous stolen Audi video. That car was back in my workshop last week and the owner had ordered a new door lock directly from Audi on the car's VIN number. He asked me to replace it, and when I did, the mechanical key would fit perfectly in the new door lock, which means that the key the car came with was the correct key for this vehicle, but somehow at some point the door locks were replaced. Now when we take a look under the hood of the car, we can see the Easytronic unit, and we can see they've been definitely doing some measurements at the connectors of the unit. And I can also see they've been taking measurements at the under the hood fuse box. Now when we take a look inside the car, we can find the instruction manual for the remanufactured unit, so they definitely replaced that one. And we can see the glove box is missing. Now when we take a look at the other side, we can see they've been taking a look at the under dash fuse box, which is over there, and the top cover of the steering column is missing. So somebody definitely has been trying to diagnose this vehicle. As always, let's start out by confirming the customer complaint. The other workshop told me that this car is a no crank, no start, so it obviously also doesn't drive. Now, the other complaints are that we have no communication with the engine control module and with the transmission control module. Now let's start out with the easy part, and that's confirming the no crank, no start. So let's try to start the vehicle. And as you can see, no response whatsoever. Now also notice there's a little F displayed on the instrument cluster. Now the other workshop also told me they were unable to communicate with the engine control module or the transmission control module. So let's find out. Let's try to communicate with the engine control module. And as you can see, we didn't succeed. Now let's try the transmission control module. And again, no luck. Now let's try another module like the ABS module. And this one does communicate. So let's read the faults, and of course it's complaining that it's not receiving any information from the engine control module. So that's customer complaint confirmed. We've confirmed we've got a no crank, no start, and we also confirmed we couldn't communicate with the engine or the transmission control module. I did scan all the other modules and I can communicate to each and every one of them. Now I noticed that the battery voltage is getting a little bit low, so I'm going to hook up a battery charger before we take our next step. So I quickly hooked up a battery maintainer so we don't have to worry about the battery voltage while we're diagnosing this vehicle. Now in the next step, we need to make a choice. We can't communicate with the engine control module or with the transmission control module. So we need to start our diagnosis at one of those two modules. Now since all the problems started with the transmission control module, I think we need to start there, and as a bonus, it's quite easy accessible. So this is the wiring diagram for the transmission control module. We can see that the communication wires, CAN high and CAN low, end up at pin 23 and 20 at the connector of the transmission control module. It is a white and a blue wire, and then the next step we're going to hook up our oscilloscope to see if there's any communication at those wires. Another interesting thing to see is that the communication to the engine control module, which is this module, according to this wiring diagram, goes through the transmission control module. So I removed the lower connector right there underneath the other one from the transmission control module, which contains the communication wires. Now I hooked up the oscilloscope to the blue and white wire at pin 20 and 23, remember from the wiring diagram, which are CAN high and CAN low. Now, I must admit, it isn't the prettiest waveform I've ever seen, but there's definitely communication going on at the transmission control module connector. So there is communication at the transmission control module, but we're unable to communicate with it. So why is the transmission control module not responding? Now let's start with the basics. Let's start by checking the powers and grounds to that module. So let's take another look at our wiring diagram. Now let's start out by checking the powers. In this wiring diagram, we can see this module has got 3 powers. They come from 3 separate fuses. They end up at pin 3, 5, and 10 at the module. It's a red and violet wire, a red and green wire, and a violet white wire. So this is our setup. We've got the test light connected to battery negative, so when we touch a positive or a power feed, the test light should light up, and it does. Now let's start out by checking this fat red and gray wire on pin 5, and that should be a power feed. And by the way, the ignition is on. So let's check it, and as you can see, the test light lights up, so that power feed is okay. Now let's continue with the one above it, which is a violet and white wire on pin number 10. So let's gently back probe it, and our test light does not light up. So let's back probe it one more time. Well, I'm definitely in, and doesn't light up, so we're definitely missing a power feed on that violet and white wire. Now when we take a look at a wiring diagram, we can see that our violet white wire gets its power from fuse 14, which is a 5 amp fuse in the underhood fuse box. Now fuse 14 is this little 5 amp fuse right over here. So let's check the power to the fuse with a test light. Now when we touch a power, like on this 70 amp big fuse over here, our test light lights up. Now let's check that little 5 amp fuse number 14, and we can see that our test light doesn't light up on either side of that fuse. So somehow we are missing a power feed to fuse number 14. So to make sure we're on the right track, I want to do a little test. So I hooked up my test light to that violet white wire, and when I provide fuse number 14 with the power feed with my power probe, the test light should light up. So providing it with the power feed, and the test light does light up. And let's do it again, and again the test light lights up. Now I'm also hearing my throttle body coming back to life, and I didn't hear that before, so we're definitely on the right track. Now where does the power to fuse 14 actually come from? Let's take another look at the wiring diagram. In the diagram we can see that the power to fuse 14 comes from relay K79, and relay K79 is the ignition main circuit relay. This is the ignition main relay that's supposed to power up fuse 14. Now of course we could simply have a bad relay. Now to rule that out, or to confirm that, I want to change it with one of the 2 identical relays in this fuse box and see if the power to fuse 14 returns. So let's change it with a known good relay, and the power to fuse 14 has not returned. Inside a relay you will find a coil and a switch. When the coil is provided with a power and a ground, current starts to flow through the coil and it becomes magnetic and closes the switch. In this example, the relay is being used to power up a light bulb. But in our case, it's used to power up fuse 14. In this example, we can clearly see that a 4-pin relay needs two powers. One to power up the coil and one to provide power to the switch, which when it closes, powers up your load. We can also clearly see that this relay is ground side switched. When we provide a ground to the coil, it becomes an electromagnet and closes the switch and provides power to your load. In this case, a light bulb, in our case, fuse 14. Now let's check the relay's in and outputs. In order for the relay to work, it needs two power feeds. So let's quickly check those. Now as you can see, both power feeds are present. Now when the relay closes, it needs to power up fuse 14. So let's power up that leg of the relay with our power probe and see if we can energize fuse 14. And we can, so that means there's nothing wrong with the wiring from the relay to the fuse. Now there's one more thing we need to check. We need to check if the relay is being commanded. Now let's find out if everything else is working as it should by manually controlling the relay. Now when I put the relay in, and don't put it in all the way, I can get under it with my power probe and manually ground it. Now, I don't know if you can hear that, but that relay is definitely clicking now. Now let's confirm it's powering up fuse 14. And as you can see, it does. So we have now learned that our relay is not being controlled. So let's have another look at the wiring diagram. In the wiring diagram, we can see that our relay is being controlled by that violet-yellow wire. Now that violet-yellow wire is being controlled by the multifunction control module. Now I backtraced that yellow-violet wire and I found out that it comes into the fuse box through this connector over here. So this is the yellow-violet wire, so let's back probe it. Let's see what we've got. Now as you can see, right now we've got a power at the control wire, which is normal because the power comes through the coil of the relay, and when we ground that coil, the relay should switch. And as you can hear, it does. Now as we have learned from the wiring diagram, that violet and yellow wire is being controlled by the multifunction control module. To be more specific, it's controlled at pin 1 of the multifunction control module. So let's go to the module and do some measurements at pin 1. Now at this connector in the upper right corner at pin 1, we can find that violet-yellow wire. This wire goes directly to the control side of our relay. Now let's back probe it to see what's going on. Now what I did, I hooked one side of my test light up to battery positive, and I connected the other side to pin 1 of that multifunction control module. Now if that test light is grounded, that test light is going to light up. Now I'm inside the car and let's turn the ignition on and off. And let's see what's going on pin 1. Now as you can see, the control module is controlling the ground side of the relay. Now this wire in the underhood fuse box is the exact same wire that comes directly from pin 1 of the multifunction control module inside the car. Now when we measure on that wire, we can see we've got a power feed, which is normal because as long as we don't ground the relay, there's voltage going through the coil to the control side of the relay. Now when we ground the relay will switch. Now let's see what's happening inside the car on pin 1 of the multifunction control module. When I hook up the power probe to that pin, we can see we don't have voltage at pin 1 of the control module. But when I turn on the ignition, the control module does ground that wire. So that means that the voltage is not making it to pin 1 of the control module, which indicates a broken wire. Now I temporarily installed a jumper wire from the control side of the relay to pin 1 of the multifunction control module inside the car. Now let's see what happens when we try to start the car with the jumper wire installed. That's awesome, the car starts again. Now there's one more thing left for us to do, and that's to find that broken wire. So the wire must be broken somewhere between there and there inside the car, which is not a big distance. Now normally broken wires are caused by heat, vibrations, or water damage. Now in this case, I don't really suspect heat or vibration. The only thing that makes sense is water damage. And the only place to find that must be somewhere in here. But of course, at this point, I'm just guessing, so let's see if we can find that broken wire. So off camera, I removed the wiper blades, the plastic cover, and the wiper mechanism, and I peeled back some of the tape on the wiring loom going into the car's interior. Now, this is a picture of what it looked like before I peeled back the tape, and this is what we found. This is the violet yellow wire, and just look at that. I've got the wiring repaired and all taped up, and I checked the other wires. I gave them the old pull test and they were all fine. Now I obviously still need to clean out this plenum chamber, and I need to make sure that all the drains are open so water doesn't stand a chance and potentially damage our wiring. Now I obviously need to install everything, but that doesn't prevent us from doing our final check. Is this car fixed? Moment of truth, here we go. Does it start? Oh yeah. Diagnose Dan, with help from you guys of course, fixed it again. With a wiring diagram and some common sense, we were able to fix this car. Now obviously without powers and grounds, you won't be able to communicate with a control module. Now this had nothing to do with the previous repair. The remanufactured part was remanufactured correctly and it was installed correctly. The broken wire was just bad luck and coincidence. Now I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please subscribe to my channel, and when you hit the little bell, you will get a notification each time I upload a new video. And remember, Diagnose Dan, fixed it again. See you next time, guys.